I'm going to give you a new way to think about God's sovereignty versus our free will and how He ordains things. And this is something that not many people are talking about, because I see a lot of videos talking about God's sovereignty and like how our free will corresponds with that and somehow aligns with that. Well, I'm going to give you a new perspective. So think about how in life, how there's a lot of pros and cons to things. How there's a lot of opposites to something that is good. Like, for example, let's say God makes someone, because God puts all these desires in our hearts because He formed us, like He knew us before we were formed in our mother's womb. And He's our creator. So with that truth established, that He creates us, we didn't create ourselves, we didn't make ourselves to be the way we are, we can move on with the idea that God puts desires on our hearts, like from the beginning. So think about like how someone is gifted for business. Someone can have a great hunger to make money, and the good out of that can be that businessman can use that money to build God's kingdom, to build churches, to send money to people abroad that are suffering and that need just vital things that we take for granted, like food and water and shelter, transportation. That same businessman who can make a lot of money, who has the gift of doing that, can send money to God's people. Well, that same type of person can also use that money for greed, to build up his kingdom, to minister to his needs, to make himself greater, and thus not trusting in God, not trusting in the Lord. So then we have someone who can, let's say someone who loves a lot, like they have the gift of hospitality. They're so loving and kind towards people. And you know these people, they're probably in your life, they're probably in your church. They're so welcoming, they're so forthcoming, they're so, hey, I don't know your name. Can I get to know you? And just invite you in their home. A warmth that is so deep and loving. It's from God. Well, that same person, because of repeated times of being, hurt and just people taking their kindness for weakness, constantly, hurting them, that same person can become closed off and filled with bitterness and anger towards people because of repeatedly being hurt and taken advantage of. Now let's take another type of person. Let's take a smart person, someone that just is so knowledgeable in like science, and God can use that person to explain the vast intricacies of science that show that there's evidence for a God. And through their intellect, they can be used by God to do that. And one person that comes to mind is John Lennox. So, I haven't really done that much like deep research into like what he thinks and like how he explains things, but I've just seen some of his stuff, and very intellectual guy and scientific, of course, but a Christian. That same type of person with all that knowledge can become closed off to the idea that there is a creator and become puffed up in pride that their knowledge supersedes the idea of a creator. And so, therefore, they can be prideful and think, hey, I got all the answers. I know all the theories. I know all the little intricacies about the world, even though they're not saying that deliberately, but in their heart they are, because they're puffed up in that knowledge. That same person that God makes that with a knowledge to soak up all the scientific knowledge can be puffed up in pride and say that there is no God. So what I'm trying to get at is God puts good desires in people, good things that can be used for His glory. Why? Because He formed us. He made us. We didn't create ourselves, like I said at the beginning of the video. But those same characteristics that enter into a sin-cursed world can have an opposing reaction to that person in the course of their life, to where that good can quickly turn into bad. And we see that if you eat, let's say you eat meat, and meat is good for you, but you're only eating meat and you're constantly eating that all the time, that can turn into something bad because you're not getting all the full nutrients that vegetables have or that fruit has. And the same thing with, let's say you just like fruit and you're just eating fruit all the time. Well, you can become so malnourished. It is good for you, but if you continually eat that, you can become so malnourished that you don't have the nutrients that meat provides. And so we see, and I see, so many opposing reactions that there's a good thing, but then with that good, it can turn into bad. There is an opposite. There is an equal opposite, which is bad, which is evil. Any good can have an opposing evil to it. And so that's what I'm trying to get at, is God forms us. God is not the author of evil, but yet he knows where our shortcomings can be because he created the good desires in our hearts that have an equal evil reaction to it in a sin-cursed world, because we still have free will. We still can choose to do good or evil. God is not held responsible for the evil that we do. The evil that we do is because we want to do it. He doesn't tempt us to go do evil. And neither can we say that the devil makes us do evil, because yes, the devil is the tempter now, but we are still led astray by our own desires, our own sinful desires. And so this is how I'm kind of processing recently about how God's sovereignty and man's free will work. And this is just one facet of it. Like, there's so many more complex intricacies that are involved in God's sovereignty and man's free will, but this is just one thing that I noticed that not many people are talking about. And so I thought I'd share it, and I thought that this would be informative to gathering more knowledge about how it works. But most importantly, the takeaway I want you to take from this is, don't get so heavily involved in God's sovereignty, man's free will, to the point where you need to figure it out. Ultimately, nobody can figure it out, because if we're trying to figure out that, we're trying to get into the mind of God and say, and become like God, because knowledge in the end puffs up, but it's love. When we think about the character of God and how sovereign he is and how in control he is of things, it should make us say, Lord, I don't know all the answers, but thank God that you know how this works and I don't. And therefore, I'm going to worship you in this, because it magnifies how incredible you are, how much you know and how little I know. So therefore, I want to worship you more. And that's what it should make us do. When we ponder these things, we shouldn't be arguing with one another, because we could be wrong. I could be wrong. But it should make us want to praise God even more, to say, Lord, you're so perfect. You're so incredible. I don't know all the answers, but I'm going to worship you in this, and I'm going to trust you in your word and what it says. And I don't have all the answers, but I know you do. So I hope this encourages you, and I hope this makes you want to worship God even more, because he is incredible, and he is sovereign over all creation, and he is Lord of everything. So anyway, hope this encourages you. God bless you all.